Emma wiped down the last table in her section and glanced at the clock on the wall of the Golden Spoon restaurant. It was almost 3 in the afternoon, and the lunch rush was finally slowing down. She had been working as a server here in downtown London for 2 years now, and even though the pay was barely enough to cover her rent, she genuinely loved helping people and making their dining experience special. The restaurant was elegant, with white tablecloths and sparkling glasses, catering to wealthy business people and tourists. Robert, the manager, was a stern man who cared more about profits than people. He often scolded the staff for being too generous with customers or spending too much time chatting. Emma had learned to stay out of his way, but she never let his harsh attitude change her naturally kind heart. The November afternoon was particularly cold, with rain pattering against the large windows. Most customers hurried in shaking off their expensive coats and settling into the warm, inviting atmosphere. Emma was refilling water glasses when she noticed an elderly gentleman standing hesitantly at the entrance. William looked to be in his 70s, with silver hair and gentle eyes that seemed to carry the weight of many sorrows. His dark coat was clearly old, with patches sewn carefully on the elbows, and his black shoes were worn then from years of walking. He stood there for a long moment, as if gathering courage to enter such a fancy place. The hostess, Jessica, looked at William. With obvious disapproval, she whispered something to another server, Mark, who shook his head and turned away. Emma watched this exchange with growing concern. She had seen this reaction before when people who looked poor or different entered the restaurant. Emma walked over to the entrance with her brightest smile. William seemed surprised that someone was approaching him with kindness rather than suspicion. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the Golden Spoon," Emma said warmly, her voice carrying genuine care and respect. William's face lit up slightly. "Thank you, miss. I was wondering if I might have a table, just for a little while." "Of course," Emma replied, leading him to a quiet corner table by the window. She pulled out his chair and handed him a menu, treating him exactly as she would treat any other customer. William studied the menu carefully, his weathered fingers tracing the prices. Emma noticed his hands shaking slightly, whether from cold or nerves. She could not tell. After several minutes, he looked up at her with apologetic eyes. "I would like just a cup of tea, please." "Earl Grey, if you have it." Emma nodded and brought him the tea in their finest china cup and saucer. William wrapped his hands round the warm cup and seemed to relax for the first time since entering. He sat quietly, occasionally glancing out the window at the busy street, where people hurried past with umbrellas and shopping bags. The lunch crowd began to fill the restaurant again. Business people in expensive suits occupied most tables, their conversations loud and confident. William sat in his corner, nursing his single cup of tea, trying to make it last as long as possible. Emma noticed he had been there for almost 2 hours, and his cup had been empty for quite some time. During a brief lull, Emma approached his table. She could see William was tired, and there was something deeply sad in his eyes. When she looked closer, she noticed his hands trembling as he tried to count a few coins from his pocket, clearly calculating whether he could afford anything else. "Would you like another cup of tea, sir?" Emma asked gently. William shook his head. "No, thank you, miss. I should probably be going soon." But Emma could see he did not want to leave. This one, safe place seemed to be a refuge for him from whatever troubles waited outside. She made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Without saying another word, Emma went to the kitchen and prepared a full meal. She loaded a plate with roast chicken, roasted vegetables, fresh bread with butter, and a small bowl of soup. It was one of their most popular dishes, costing more than £30. She carried the steaming plate to William's table and set it down in front of him. His eyes widened in confusion and worry. "I did not order this, miss," William said softly. Looking round nervously, Emma knelt down beside his chair so she could speak quietly. "It is on the house, sir. Please enjoy it. You look like you could use a good meal." Tears began to form in William's eyes. "I cannot pay for this. I only have enough for the tea." "You do not need to pay," Emma said with her gentlest smile. "Sometimes we all need a little kindness." From across the restaurant, Robert had been watching this entire exchange. His face grew redder with each passing moment. He marched across the dining room, his footsteps heavy and angry, causing other customers to look up from their meals. "What do you think you are doing?" Robert shouted, his voice echoing through the restaurant. "We do not run a charity here. You are giving away our profits." Emma stood up calmly, facing her angry manager. "He is a customer, and he needed help. You are fired. Pack your things and leave immediately," Robert declared loudly. Emma felt her heart break, but she held her head high. She had done the right thing. Emma stood outside the Golden Spoon restaurant, holding her small cardboard box that contained her few personal belongings from work. The cold November wind cut through her thin jacket, and she shivered as she tried to process what had just happened. 2 years of dedicated service had ended in a matter of minutes because she had shown compassion to someone in need. The busy London street buzzed with afternoon traffic and pedestrians hurrying to their destinations. Emma felt lost and uncertain about her future. She had rent to pay next week, and her younger brother Tom was counting on her support while he finished his studies. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders as she wondered how she would find another job quickly enough. As she began walking toward the bus stop, Emma heard footsteps behind her on the wet pavement. She turned round to see William hurrying after her, his old coat flapping in the wind. His face was streaked with tears, and his eyes held an intensity she had not seen before. "Miss, please wait," William called out, his voice trembling with deep emotion. Emma stopped and faced him, surprised by the urgency in his manner. During their brief interaction in the restaurant, he had seemed quiet and withdrawn, but now there was something different about him, as if a dam had burst inside his heart. "My name is William Thompson," he began, his voice growing steadier as he spoke. "I need to tell you something very important, something that might help you understand what your kindness meant to me today." Emma listened carefully, sensing that this conversation would be unlike any she had ever had. William's weathered hands shook as he spoke, but his eyes never left hers. "6 months ago, my entire world collapsed," William continued. "My construction business, which I had built over 40 years, failed completely. The economic downturn hit us hard, and I lost contract after contract. I had to let go of all my employees, people who had worked with me for decades. These were not just workers. They were like family to me." Emma felt her heart ache as she watched this dignified man relive his painful memories. She could see how much it hurt him to speak about his losses, but he seemed determined to share his story with her. "Then, just 2 months after the business failed, my dear wife Margaret passed away from cancer," William said, his voice breaking slightly. "She had been sick for a long time, but I thought we would have more years together. She was my partner in everything, my best friend for 52 years. Tears began to flow more freely down William's cheeks, but he continued speaking with quiet strength. Emma reached out and gently touched his arm, offering what comfort she could. "Without the business income, I could not keep up with the medical bills and the mortgage on our home. The bank took everything. I found myself living in a tiny rented room above a shop, with nothing but a few photographs and memories of the life Margaret and I had built together William paused and looked round at the busy street, as if seeing it clearly for the first time in months, for weeks. I barely left that little room. I felt invisible, worthless. Like nobody cared whether I lived or died. The world seemed to move on without me, and I began to believe that maybe it would be better if I just disappeared. Emma felt tears welling up in her own eyes as she began to understand the depth of William's despair. She had seen sadness in his face at the restaurant, but she had not realized how close he had come to giving up completely. Today, I came to that restaurant with a terrible plan, William admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I had decided, but after finishing one last cup of tea in a beautiful place, I would walk to the Thames and end my suffering. I felt so alone, so forgotten by the world. Emma gasped softly. Shocked by this revelation, the thought that this gentleman had been planning to harm himself made her heart break. "But then you came to my table," William said, his voice growing stronger and more hopeful. "You looked at me like I was a human being who mattered. You spoke to me with respect and kindness. When you brought me that meal, you did not just feed my hungry body, you fed my starving soul." William reached into his worn coat pocket and pulled out a faded business card. The edges were soft from years of handling, and the print was slightly worn. But Emma could still read it clearly. "This was my company," William said, pressing the card into Emma's hands. "Thompson Construction. We build affordable homes for working families all across England. I started with nothing, but determination and a desire to help people have decent places to live." Emma stared at the card in amazement. She had indeed heard of Thompson Construction. They were famous throughout London and beyond for building quality homes that ordinary families could afford. She had never imagined that this humble, broken man had once been the head of such a successful and respected company. "Because of your kindness today, I want to live again," William declared with renewed purpose in his voice. "I want to rebuild, not just my business, but my entire life, and I will never, ever forget what you did for me." Emma stared at the pile of rejection letters on her small kitchen table. 2 months had passed since she lost her job at the Golden Spoon, and despite applying to dozens of restaurants across London, nobody wanted to hire her. Word had spread quickly through the tight-knit restaurant community about the server who gave away free food to a poor customer. "We need reliable staff who understand business," one manager had told her coldly during an interview. "We cannot have employees who think they can decide when to give away our profits." Another restaurant owner had been even more direct. "I heard what happened at the Golden Spoon. We do not need troublemakers here." Emma folded the latest rejection letter and added it to the growing stack. Her savings account was nearly empty, and rent was due in just 5 days. She shared a tiny flat with her younger brother Tom, who was in his final year at university studying engineering. Tom had offered to quit school and find work to help, but Emma refused to let him sacrifice his future because of her situation. "I will figure something out," she had told him with more confidence than she felt. "You focus on your studies." But late at night, when Tom was asleep, Emma lay awake worrying about how they would survive. She had already sold most of her belongings, including her grandmother's jewelry and her laptop. The refrigerator was nearly empty, and she had been living on bread and tea for the past week. Despite her desperate situation, Emma refused to let bitterness take root in her heart. She remembered William's grateful tears and knew she had made the right choice, even if it had cost her everything. Some things were more important than money, even when money was desperately needed. One Tuesday morning, Emma walked past St. Mary's Community Centre and saw a sign asking for volunteers to help serve meals to homeless people and families in need. Without hesitation, She pushed open the heavy wooden doors and walked inside. The center was warm and welcoming, with the smell of fresh bread and soup filling the air. An older woman with kind eyes and grey hair approached her with a friendly smile. "Hello, dear. I am Margaret, the director here. Are you interested in volunteering?" "Yes," Emma replied. "I have experience serving food, and I would like to help if you need me." Margaret's face lit up. "We always need extra hands, especially people with restaurant experience. Can you start today?" Emma spent that Tuesday afternoon helping in the kitchen, preparing vegetables and setting up tables for the evening meal. When dinner time arrived, she watched as dozens of people filed in, families with young children, elderly men and women, teenagers who looked like they had nowhere else to go. As Emma served plates of hot stew and fresh bread, she treated each person with the same respect and kindness she had always shown her restaurant customers. She made eye contact, smiled genuinely, and took time to ask how everyone was doing. "You have a special gift," Margaret told her at the end of the evening. "You treat everyone with such respect and love. These people feel valued when you serve them, not like they're receiving charity." Emma began volunteering every Tuesday, and soon she was helping 3 days a week. The work did not pay any money, but it filled her heart in ways her restaurant job never had. She learned the names of regular visitors and remembered their personal stories. There was James, a former school teacher who had lost his job when budget cuts eliminated his position. He was intelligent and well-spoken, but age discrimination had made it impossible for him to find new work. Alice was a single mother with 3 young children who worked 2 part-time jobs, but still could not afford enough food for her family. David was a war veteran who struggled with both physical injuries and emotional trauma from his military service. Each person had a story, and Emma listened to all of them with patience and compassion. She celebrated small victories with them, like when James finally got a job interview, or when Alice's youngest daughter took her first steps. Meanwhile, across the city, William Thompson was working harder than he had in years. After Emma's kindness had saved his life, he had moved out of his tiny rented room and into a small but comfortable apartment every morning. He walked to the local library and spent hours researching, planning, dreaming about a new kind of business. This would not be like his old construction company. This time, William wanted to create something that would honor the compassion Emma had shown him. He wanted to build a business that would help people, not just make money. Every night before going to sleep, William thought about Emma's gentle smile and the way she had treated him with dignity when he felt worthless. He knew he owed her more than just gratitude. He owed her a chance to change her life the same way she had changed his. William had been trying to find Emma for weeks, visiting restaurants and asking questions. But nobody seemed to know where she had gone. Then, one evening, he overheard 2 women talking at a coffee shop about the wonderful volunteer at St. Mary's Community Center who treated everyone like family. "Her name is Emma," one woman said. "She used to work at a fancy restaurant, but now she helps serve meals to people who need them. She is an angel." William's heart raced with excitement. He had found her. One Tuesday evening, as Emma was wiping down tables after the dinner service, Margaret approached her with a curious expression. "Emma, there is a gentleman here to see you. He says his name is William Thompson." Emma looked up from wiping down the last table at St. Mary's Community Center and saw Margaret walking toward her with an unusual expression on her face. The evening meal service had just ended, and most of the volunteers had already gone home. The dining room was quiet except for the soft sound of chairs being stacked and dishes being washed in the kitchen. "Emma, there is someone here to see you," Margaret said with curiosity in her voice. "A gentleman who says his name is William Thompson. "Do you know him?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had not seen or heard from William since that emotional conversation outside the Golden Spoon restaurant 2 months ago. She had often wondered what had happened to him and whether he was truly rebuilding his life as he had promised. "Yes, I know him," Emma replied, setting down her cleaning cloth. "Where is he?" "He is waiting by the front entrance," Margaret said. "He seems very eager to speak with you." Emma walked toward the entrance, her mind racing with questions. When she reached the doorway, she was amazed by what she saw. William stood there looking completely transformed from the broken, desperate man she had met in the restaurant. He wore a clean, well-fitted navy blue suit that made him look dignified and professional. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his shoes were polished to a shine. Most remarkably, his eyes sparkled with energy and purpose. This was not the same defeated man who had planned to end his life just 2 months earlier. "Emma," William said, his face breaking into a warm, genuine smile. "I have been looking everywhere for you. I have so much to tell you." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes as she saw how much William had changed. The transformation was incredible, like watching someone come back to life. "William, you look wonderful," Emma said with genuine happiness. "I am so glad to see you doing well." "I owe it all to you," William replied, his voice filled with gratitude. "Your kindness that day saved my life in more ways than you can imagine. But I did not come here just to thank you again. I have a proposition that might change both our lives." William looked round the community center and smiled at the familiar sight of people helping other. "Yes, could we sit down somewhere quiet? I have something very important to discuss with you." Emma led him to a corner of the now empty dining room where they could talk privately. As they sat across from each other at one of the small tables, Emma noticed that William carried himself with the confidence of a successful businessman. But his eyes still held the warmth and humility of someone who had experienced great hardship. "For the past 2 months, I have been working harder than I have worked in years," William began, leaning forward with excitement. "Not just to rebuild my life, but to create something completely new. Something that will honor what you taught me about, treating people with dignity and respect." Emma listened carefully, intrigued by the passion in William's voice. She had never seen him this animated, even in their brief interaction at the restaurant. "I want to open a new kind of restaurant," William continued, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Not just another fancy place that serves expensive food to wealthy people. I want to create something that serves excellent food but also serves the community. I want to call it the community table." William pulled out a folder filled with papers, sketches, and business plans. "This restaurant will be different from anything London has ever seen. Yes. We will serve delicious meals to paying customers, but we will also provide free meals every single day to anyone who needs them, just like here at the community center." Emma felt her heart racing as she began to understand the scope of William's vision. This was not just a business idea. It was a mission to change how restaurants could serve their communities. "The restaurant will employ people who need second chances," William explained, showing Emma his detailed plans. "People like me who have faced hard times, people who have been homeless, people who have made mistakes but deserve another opportunity. We will pay fair wages, provide job training, and create a workplace built on respect and dignity." William paused and looked directly into Emma's eyes. "Most importantly, we will treat every single person who walks through our doors with the same kindness you showed me. Rich or poor, young or old, every customer will be valued and respected." Emma was stunned by the beauty and ambition of William's plan. She could see how much thought and care he had put into every detail. "Emma," William said, his voice becoming more serious. "I want you to be my partner in this business. Not just an employee, but a true partner who will help me make all the important decisions." Emma's mouth fell open in shock. "But William, I am just a server. I do not know anything about running a business or managing finances." William smiled and shook his head. "You know the most important thing of all. You know how to treat people with genuine kindness and respect. You understand what real hospitality means. Everything else, the paperwork, the accounting, the business, management, we can learn together or hire people to help us." Emma thought about her desperate financial situation, about Tom's university expenses, about all the wonderful people she had met at the community center who needed steady employment. This opportunity seemed almost too good to be true. "When would we start?" Emma asked, tears of joy beginning to flow down her cheeks. William smiled broadly and reached across the table to shake her hand. "How about tomorrow?" The warm autumn evening filled the community table restaurant with the gentle sounds of conversation and laughter. Emma stood behind the kitchen pass, watching the dining room with deep satisfaction. 1 full year had passed since she and William had opened their doors, and the restaurant had become something more beautiful than either of them had ever imagined. Every table was occupied tonight, just like most evenings. Business people in expensive suits sat next to families with young children. University students shared tables with elderly couples. In the back corner, the special table that was always reserved for a people who could not pay was occupied by a young mother with 2 small children, enjoying a hot meal without worry or shame. Emma had grown tremendously over the past year. The shy, uncertain server who had lost her job for showing kindness had transformed into a confident business owner and community leader. She managed a staff of 23 employees, handled the restaurant's finances, and made important decisions every day. But most importantly, she had never lost the gentle heart that had started this entire journey. Her staff loved working at the community table because Emma treated everyone with the same respect and kindness she had always shown. Many of her employees were people who had struggled to find work elsewhere. There was Michael, a former soldier who had been homeless for 2 years before William hired him as a cook. Sarah had been unemployed for 8 months after being released from prison, but now she was one of their most trusted servers. James, the former teacher Emma had met at St. Mary's Community Center, now worked as their bookkeeper and helped train new employees. William moved through the dining room like a proud grandfather, stopping at each table to chat with customers and ask about their meals. At 72 years old, he had more energy than people half his age. He loved telling anyone who would listen about how Emma's kindness had saved his life and led to the creation of the community table. "This restaurant exists because one young woman chose to feed a hungry old man," he would say with tears of gratitude in his eyes. "It proves that kindness is the most powerful force in the world." The restaurant had become famous throughout London, not just for its excellent food, but for its mission of treating every person with dignity. Food critics wrote glowing reviews, but more importantly, ordinary people felt welcome and valued when they walked through the doors. Emma was checking on the kitchen staff when she heard the familiar sound of the front door opening. She looked up through the pass window and felt her heart skip a beat. Walking into the restaurant, looking round nervously, was Robert, her former manager from the Golden Spoon. Robert looked very different from the confident, harsh man who had fired her a year ago. His expensive suit had been replaced by worn jeans and a faded shirt. His face showed the stress of unemployment and financial worry. He moved hesitantly, as if he was not sure he belonged in such a warm, welcoming place. Emma took a deep breath and walked out of the kitchen to greet him personally. She could have asked one of her servers to handle the situation, but she felt this was something she needed to do herself. "Hello, Robert," Emma said with genuine warmth in her voice. "Welcome to the community table." Robert's face showed complete surprise. He had clearly not expected to be greeted so kindly by the woman he had treated so poorly. His eyes filled with embarrassment and regret. Robert began, struggling to find the right words. "I heard about your success here. Everyone in London is talking about this place. I also heard that the Golden Spoon closed down last month. I have been out of work since then." Emma felt a wave of compassion for this man who had once been so cruel to her. She could see that life had humbled him in ways that had perhaps made him a better person. "I am sorry to hear about your job," Emma replied with sincere concern. "That must be very difficult for you. Would you like a table? Tonight's special is shepherd's pie with fresh vegetables from our garden." Robert looked down at his feet, clearly uncomfortable. "Emma, I need to be honest with you. I do not have much money right now. I probably cannot afford to eat here." Emma smiled with the same gentle expression she had given William on that life-changing day 1 year ago. "Tonight, you are our guest. Robert, please, sit wherever you would like." Robert's eyes filled with tears as Emma led him to a quiet table by the window. She personally brought him a full meal with shepherd's pie, fresh bread, and a cup of hot tea. Then she sat down across from him for a few minutes, just as she had done with William. "Emma, I owe you an apology," Robert said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I was completely wrong to fire you that day. You were right to help that old man. You showed compassion, and I showed only greed and hardness of heart. I am truly sorry." Emma reached across the table and gently touched his hand. "We all make mistakes, Robert. What matters is that we learn from them and try to do better. That is what makes us human." As the evening wound down and the last customers finished their meals, Emma and William stood together by the front door, watching people walk home with satisfied smiles on their faces. Above their heads hung a simple wooden sign that read, "Kindness is never wasted. It always comes back when you need it most." The end.